Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you today from the hallowed halls of Annam the Allfather, because today we're going to talk about giants. My name is Martin Woodwire, and I am your host for this week, and joining me as always is your host, Conor O'Brien. How is the crack, Conor?
The hallowed halls of the Allfather. I love it. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I'm pumped to talk about giants today.
Yes.
They're a monster. I like to run quite a lot. They're always really good when you see someone coming over the horizon and they just keep getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's not a small person 100 feet away. That's a giant 500 feet away. Everybody run.
It's always fun to play with scale like that with things. I just put these random, like, they weren't really giants, but they were like these enormous, like, miles tall earth elementals in an area I did, and my players just saw them in the distance, and I was like, yeah, you see this thing that looks about this big on the horizon?
Yeah.
And they were like, on the horizon, it's this big on the horizon. I was like, yep. And they're like, is it coming our way? I was like, I pretended to roll a dice, and I was like, no. And they were like, okay. They were never going to come their way, but they asked me the question.
One of my favorite tips to give any DM is sometimes just roll dice. So there doesn't need to be meaning behind it. Like, okay, so for example, they asked a question and you roll a dice. You go, no, they're not. And but that dice, that was a 1 there. If that was a 20, I would have told you the same thing. It doesn't matter. I'm doing it because I want you to believe there's a chance. Yeah, and sometimes there would be. Sometimes you're literally rolling a perception check. Other times you're like, I have no plans on doing that, but maybe. And also, occasionally when people are like, if you guys are planning an awful lot, or you're doing something, so you'll be like, what if we approach them this way, and then you go around the back because you can stealth in there, and blah blah blah. And as soon as they say, I'll go like, you're stealthing around the back. Okay, cool.
You do that a lot.
Yeah. And like, sometimes I'm genuinely rolling a perception check for the guard at the back, but other times I'm just doing it to mess with you. Or you'll be like again, I do it so often. Like I'd say there's an even number of times that I make a roll and it's a real thing, or I make a roll and it's not a real thing. Which is a little peek behind the curtain, but the problem is you never know when it is.
Yes, true.
So yeah, there's times when like I genuinely am rolling a check for something. There's times I'll make up a rule in my head. You'll be like, is this a thing? You know, is there a town nearby? And I'll just in my head go, feck it. If it's 15 or higher, there is a town nearby. It's a 15, so yeah, there's a town nearby. And like I'll do stuff like that on the fly. I'll let the dice decide stuff like that. You know, is there you guys will ask, like, okay, to take a Pat Rothfuss example of it. If you ask me, is there a chandelier in the room? I'd think to myself, would it make sense for there to be a chandelier in this room? I mean, it was formerly the house of a lord, but it's old and dilapidated, so it might be fallen. I'll say on a 10 or higher, it's a 3, so no, there is not a chandelier in this room. And I'll decide things on the fly like that, because again, I like it to be chance. Sometimes it's fun to just be like, yes, there is, because that's the thing you need to do whatever wacky move you want to do.
That is my favorite running joke in Acking. Is there a chandelier?
Yeah. Pat Rothfuss actually hasn't been on it in a very long time.
Yeah. I think
there was a new one out there last week, and I'm watching bits of it at the moment. They all seem to be in prison.
I have a question regarding that one, because it's been a strange crossover, because I watch a great podcast called the MCU Crew. It's JP, otherwise known as JP McDaniel, Jesse Cox, and then I don't know her actual name, but she's her online, her handle is like that Bronze girl, and they just call her Bronze, and they're on. It's a show called the MCU Crew where they discuss all MCU kind of stuff. But at the end of last week's show, she was like, "Oh, by the way," because she's a big D&D she's a big she streams D&D like.
She DMs stuff.
I think 5 or 6 times a week or something like that. She was saying, which is crazy. Like, fair play. I DM once a week and it knackers me. Like, but
there's times where like I'll DM twice a week, and that means I have to stop DMing for a week after that. So like I burnt myself out. I've done too much.
But she was saying she's joining. She'll be in the next Akink game, I think, or was she in the one you've seen?
I haven't watched the entire episode yet. But I think at that Bronze girl is her handle on Twitter.
It is, yeah.
I follow other people who are in that, who were sharing pictures of her she had a hood and she was in costume. I guess she's like a caster of some kind. And she was in costume with Evelyn Marthane and
cool.
Omen Dran, and all those guys, they were dressed up as their characters and they were obviously ready for the show. So I'm assuming she will show up at some point during the episode, but she hasn't thus far. I'm only about 15-20 minutes into it.
Awesome. Well, I know what I'm doing when we finish recording the podcast.
Yeah, honestly, I've watched I've only watched like 15 minutes. It's very funny in the opening because the touch shows are always really funny.
Yeah.
You got Jerry Holkins, who plays Omen Dran. He just has a really, really good way of carrying the narrative, and he's so quick to the punch as well. Like if there's a joke to be made, he will find it and he will make it. It's very, very good.
Yeah, watch acting, folks. It's great.
Oh, acting! It's a good introductory thing because first of all, there isn't a lot of them. You don't have to be like committing to something like Critical Role, where there's literally hundreds of hours worth of content. It's literally they do 2 or 3 shows a year since about 2014, give or take.
They usually do all the PAXs. They'll do like 3 or 4 PAXs a year.
Exactly, yeah. So they'll do 2 to 3 shows. There's a couple of.
They'll usually do one for D&D Live as well, I think. Joe, once
they
a
do,
year,
or they get the
D&D
characters to appear in it sometimes. But it's really, really good. They swap out. There's a couple of key characters that are almost always there, and then they swap out other people from time to time. There's some people that, there's some great characters in it. They don't take it too seriously. It's really lighthearted and really funny. And of course, then Chris Perkins DM'd it for the longest time, and then
Jeremy
Crawford took over a year or so ago, a little over a year ago, I think.
I'd say that's probably like 2 years now. You're probably getting pandemic mind warp there.
I'm getting pandemic mind, time warp. It's only about 2 years. Who's also very good, and actually Kate Welch is DMing this the most recent one.
Oh really? Oh yes, I saw something about this. Yes, I saw she was DM. I'm so down. I love Kate Welch. She's phenomenal.
Oh, she's great.
She was so good
I was always
as
really bummed when I heard
Rosie
she left Wizards.
Yeah, she was great as Rosie Beestinger in the previous games.
Not her grandma's grandma.
Yeah, because she beat that ass.
She was that means a whole different thing, Martin. She played Rosie Beestinger, the like 100 and something year old halfling open palm. Oh no, she was a shadow monk, I think.
She was a monk of some description. She kicked a lot of ass.
Yeah, she's great. That's the Acquisitions Inc. C team run, which is also very good.
I've not actually watched them, but also very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, Conor, giants. When you think about like giants in D&D, or sorry,
we should address the giant in the room, Mark.
Yeah, where is it? It's like that great. I think it's great. It's a terrible pun and a bit memey, but it's like Joe, I had a meeting with my boss at work, and they were like, we'll leave this for the time being. I was like, where is he?
The time being.
Yeah. But yeah, giants. When you think of giants, I suppose just in general, I suppose in like pop culture.
Can I cut you off for 1 second before I forget a terrible joke I make in the similar vein?
Oh, please go on.
If ever anybody says to me, "Oh, you're just in time," I immediately turn to someone, put out my hand, and go, "Hi, I'm Justin. Just in time."
I hope you don't do that to many people.
I do. That's why I don't know a lot of people.
Oh God, it's like that when I was in work one day, and our coach was like, "Some woman is hugging a tree outside my house, and I have no idea why." And I just like. I like the internal message system. I just replied to that going, "Would you say she has you stumped?"
It's not a pun, but my manager sent us a couple of weeks back. He lives in Cork, and he sent us an image from out his window. He was working away his computer, and he just like looked over the monitor and took his phone and took a picture over it. And out on his street, there was just a goat or a couple of goats just wandering around. And he doesn't live in the country; he lives like in a suburb in Cork. And there was just a couple of goats wandering around, and I think did it show up on like on Twitter or on Facebook or something?
Probably
I
like r/Ireland or something.
Yeah, well, no, it was like a news site, and it was because obviously slow news day. They were like goats disrupt traffic in Cork suburb or something like that.
Jesus, that's just so reminds me of that bit in Hot Fuzz where they send them off to chase around the swans.
I haven't seen Hot Fuzz in so long.
Oh, Hot Fuzz is great. But yeah, I suppose to get back on topic, when you think of giants, in I suppose a modern context, what's the first kind of things that jumped your mind?
primarily D&D itself. I think that's my. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of other giant stuff, but D&D is where I tend to go to immediately. I tend to think of the different kinds of giants like storm, fire, frost, and all that.
Of course. Yeah.
I also, and probably because they're so heavily tied into it, Norse mythology has the Jotun, the giants, that come up an awful lot, and they're a very core part. Particularly if you watch Marvel and stuff, and then you look at like Loki, who's like half of a frost giant. He is actually all frost giant, is he?
Yeah, he's
different
all
from
frost
in the mythology, it's like it's all over the place, and
I believe
Odin be riding people he shouldn't be riding, and all this other jazz.
In the mythology, he's half god, half giant. And him and Thor are not related. They're like blood brothers more so than any. Do you know that thing?
Yeah, they don't. In this, they have actually. Yeah, that's the thing. He's like adopted in Marvel, but then like you said, it's more of a ceremonial bond or something. It's a whole. It gets really muddled because there's also a lot of conflicting stuff when it comes to Norse mythology that kind of contradicts one another. And then of course everybody has their own take.
We just don't have a lot of it. It's there's a lot missing. Like most of what we know of is based off of like 2 or 3, like large collections of stories, but like they do 2 or 3 sources, you know.
There was like was it a Christian monk?
Yeah, but a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
so a lot of the stuff, similarly to our own Irish mythology, a lot of it would have originally been handed down orally, and then what happens is it was recorded later by like Christian scribes and monks and stuff like that, and so obviously those stories are then filtered down through the lens of Christianity there, which is why you get stuff like in Irish mythology where there was like the triple goddess Brigid, who was like I think she was like
a mother goddess of nature and healing and
she stuff. Was like nature and skills and craft as well. She was like had like 3 different things that just gets compounded down then into Saint Brigid, who is who a lot of the same feats she did were things that Brigid did in the Irish mythology. So you kind of get that stuff. You get that stuff kind of straight down. And I think Norse mythology is a really good thing to bring up because Norse mythology has been super prevalent in like pop culture for feels like the last decade, maybe.
I see where you're going, by the way. I see what you're trying to steer the conversation towards right now. I know exactly what you want to talk about. Let's just jump into it. God of War Ragnarok was announced officially. We saw some gameplay footage, folks. It was really, really good. Martin can't contain himself any longer.
Okay, I was going to bring up God of War, but just mainly because the story of that game centers fairly heavily around giants.
It does.
And that game was super, super popular, and nearly everyone who played it loved it. So
yeah,
I was going to bring it up as, again, like just something that would have like giants in pop culture and on people's minds fairly regularly. And it does help that, yes, I love the game, and yes, God of War Ragnarok came out, and yes, I squealed like a little girl when I saw the trailer. And yes, I'm going to buy it immediately, and yes, it will be awesome. Now, but I was just going to bring it up because it does have to do with giants. But yes, Conor, you are right. But yeah, that's what I would jump to. There's also stuff like I think isn't there that Troll Hunter movie, and then there's
it's I haven't seen it, but I know it centers around similar ideas.
Yeah, there's the Troll Hunter stuff, and then as well as D&D and like RPG games, and there was a great game.
You got like Vikings, the show as well.
Oh yeah, totally.
Viking, obviously, it's not so heavily based in the mythology section, but obviously the Scandinavian Norse culture and stuff is there, which you know there's a through line is giants from there.
Odin literally shows up in an episode of Vikings, by the way.
I don't think I've gone that far.
It's later series, but yeah, he shows up like for like that long.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but it's just been super, super prevalent in just, I'd say, modern culture, particularly around like if you like WoW and like stuff like that, like giants, or I think there's giant. I haven't played WoW, so I could be talking up my hole completely. But I think like giants, there's a lot of giants in WoW. There'd be there definitely is actually, because there's like giant cards in Hearthstone, which is the closest I've gotten to WoW.
Okay.
But there's stuff like that, and then like obviously, and like there's so much, like in particular in like metal music, there's like songs and stuff and albums about giants and stuff like that. But yeah, they're just metal. Yes. Amon Amarth in particular are great. But yeah, if they're just like super prevalent, and they're a really fun thing to use in D&D, and like they're such a core part of like D&D lore as well, that like I think it's just going to be a lot of fun to talk about them here. So I suppose if you're to look at Norse mythology again, you got some really prevalent giant figures in that. You've got Ymir, who was the father of the giants, and basically he existed. He was like, it's Norse mythology is real weird, right? And I'm probably going to get some of this wrong, but this is a basic, very very quick explanation of how giants came to be in Norse mythology. There was the Gununga gap, and then in that gap there was a cow, a salt block, and then there was a cow, and that cow licked the salt block into becoming Ymir the giant, I believe. And then Ymir, when he slept and his legs where his legs touched together, basically male and female giants were born from his legs. Yeah, it's real weird, man. It's real weird.
You know what? I can't. I mean, I can't. I mean, look, here's the thing.
Basically, a giant space cow licks the entire universe of Norse mythology into creation. If you want a real TLDR about it, she's called Udr Humla, I believe.
Udr, her name is Udr.
I'm 100,000% definitely absolutely butchering the pronunciation of that, but okay. Something like it begins with a UD. But yeah, there are a lot of I love giants. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say mythology is like, we can forgive mythology because let's be honest, it's super super weird. Like in every facet of mythology, there's always like things or like creatures or people that do or say or are part of weird things. You're Cuchulainn. No, it wasn't Cuchulainn. It was Cuchulainn. Who went into the rage into the
Cuchulainn.
Cuchulainn.
Yeah.
Cuchulainn went into basically a rage when he had this supernatural ability to roid out, and his muscles would swell and all this kind of stuff. But the description of how he did it seems very like unconventional. Like, he doesn't just get big. Like, one arm would get bigger than the other, and then like his eye would literally pop out of his socket and dangle on his face. And
the other one would shoot way back into his skull as well. His hair would stand up straight. And it would be so like, it would stand up straight and would be so stiff that if you dropped an apple on it, it would pierce the apple. He would have he had a blood aura basically, and as well like all of the joints in his body twisted backwards.
That's just a really, like, I get that he's meant to be like, this is his like, in modern terms, this is him going Super Saiyan essentially. But like, the thing is, that's a really, like, with his limbs flipping backwards, his eyes doing what they do, like, that seems like a really unconventional way to fight, even if you are way stronger in that form. But again, mythology is weird. Zeus had a habit of polymorphing, for, if we want to stay on topic for D&D, he had a habit of polymorphing into different animal forms and then sleeping with those animals. And that was the guy they worshipped. That was the main dude.
Not animals. He would he very famously polymorphed himself into a swan and sexually assaulted a woman.
Oh god, yes.
Yeah.
And again, that was the main guy. That was the main dude. Like, he's Zeus. He's the big guy. He's the head honcho.
The gods are like not great people in Greek mythology. Like, Medusa became Medusa because I believe she was raped in a temple of Poseidon, and then, or was she? No, I think she was raped in a temple of Athena, and Athena basically went, that was your fault, and because that was your fault for profaning my temple, snake hair.
So Athena is a victim blaming asshole then. Okay, that's good to know.
And I think it might have been Poseidon that did it to her as well, that assaulted her.
I don't know I know bits and pieces about Greek mythology. I know Poseidon in particular is more of an asshole than most of the others.
The earth shaker, like.
Yeah. Mythology is weird. We'll overlook that. Norse
sorry for going real dark there for a few moments. Yeah, Jesus. Sorry.
On to lighter notes. When you look at it, Norse mythology is kind of, you can draw a direct through line between Norse mythology and us rolling dice once a week, because Norse mythology very much heavily inspired the Tolkien universe.
Absolutely.
And Tolkien writing all of the worlds, which became the modern staple for fantasy, which led to D&D being created, which, 40 odd years or 50 odd years later, leads to us playing and rolling dice once a week and playing Maple Leaf.
Absolutely. And like, so much of that is just pulled straight through in for, like, because obviously you, like, in Norse mythology, you do, like, Ymir was a frost giant, and then there's Surtur, who was the fire giant who destroys Asgard. Which you would have seen if you've seen Thor Ragnarok.
Yep.
Spoiler, but it's been a while since Thor Ragnarok came out, so I think that's
I
okay.
don't. I think we're okay. If you haven't seen it at this point. Like.
I know, like maybe I know, man. I don't think a lot of people maybe have seen Thor Ragnarok. You know, it's that small indie film by indie director Taika Waititi. You know, with a home and away star
Chris
Hemsworth.
Chris something. I can. He's up and coming. He's meant to be getting pretty big. I don't know if he'll. We'll see how it pans out.
Yeah. But those guys, like, I would love. I really wish that D&D had them literally like a Ymir and Surtur stat block. That would be so much fun. Just
you could stat those out easily.
Oh yeah, but I'm lazy and I'd like them to make it for me.
I want them to do it for me.
Yeah, but like. Jeez, like just thinking about it, because like Ymir is literally the father of all giants, and then Surtur is a fire giant so strong he defeats Tyr in battle, and then he goes and destroys all of Asgard and sets the world on fire. Like that's gotta be like up near Tarask levels of CR. Like,
yeah, I mean, like up there with the stat blocks you have for all the demon princes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you know, at least in the 20s at least.
Yeah, and you like just talking about like stat blocks. Actually, you get some. We'll get into it later, but like so like you got your fire. You got so many kinds of giants. You've got like, and they kind of scale, which is what I kind of like about them. You can kind of scale your giant as your party levels. You know. You've got like.
Oh yeah. I mean, like you wouldn't have a third or fourth level party facing off against a storm giant. More like a hill, maybe a stone.
I don't know if you like really didn't like your players. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because Jesus.
God, I really need this campaign to end.
Yeah, with session 4, and I hate it. Oh God. Because like I've seen a storm giant once in the entire time I've played D&D, and it fisted a castle.
That was when we were playing.
Yes.
I remember that being described, and what happened was there was a hole in the lower part of the wall that my character tried to sneak through, and just before he got to the far end of the wall, it was described that a foot, and this is like a 10-15 foot diameter hole punched in the wall. When my character got through to the other side, a foot came down that basically closed off the entire other end of it. A big blue foot that was belonging to a storm giant. So yeah, we don't use them terribly often, but I mean,
there's a reason they don't get broken out very often, because if we might as well go into the Ordning now, or the Ordning as it's called now, and have a chat about like how giants basically see themselves and work in D&D, because we kind of established where they've come from a bit, and probably talked a little bit too much about mythology. But like in terms of
we definitely crossed some lines of mythology there.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: mythology is a minefield for that kind of stuff, though. So we'll leave it as it is.
It is true. There's a lot of fun stuff in mythology, but there's also a lot of stuff where you're like, oh wow, that's kind of really messed up.
Remember the Disney movie Hercules? Remember how much fun that was? Don't Google Hercules.
I love that movie. I wore the VHS copy of that movie out. I watched it so much as a kid. I then, when I had access to pocket money books in the internet, found out that oh god, what? Oh no.
Yeah.
You mean Zeus and Hera didn't love each other?
They weren't a happy, loving family like we see in the movie. Oh god.
Hera didn't really love her baby.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And also that it wasn't Hera's baby. But yeah,
it also wasn't Hera's baby.
Yeah, you are not the mom.
So yeah, I think just on we'll say closing topics on the origins of giants and stuff like that. Giants are pretty prevalent mythology the world over.
Yeah.
You know, you have cyclopses and stuff like that appear in Greek mythology. You have the Jotun themselves that are a very intricate part of Norse mythology.
Yeah.
There's definitely some. I don't know if there's actual proper research done into this, but you can definitely draw the kind of line between the Jotun and the Fomorians in Celtic mythology, because the Tuatha De Danann, is it the Tuatha De Danann?
Tuatha De Danann.
Tuatha De Danann are the Irish Celtic gods.
Yep.
But then their mortal enemies, these anti-gods, were the Fomorians, and they were giants that lived in the ocean and would walk up out of the water and wreak havoc and stuff like that. And in a similar vein, you have like the Asgard and stuff like that. Not the Asgard, they're called Asgardian. They're called.
So there's two classes. It'll sound really familiar from Tolkien, but there's the Valar and the No, that's Tolkien. That's literally Tolkien, Martin. What are you talking about?
Tolkien.
You know, it was the Vanir and the Aesir, and the Aesir are your Thor.
Yeah.
The Aesir are your likes of your Thor, your Odin, and Balder. The Vanir then are your likes of Freya.
Freya and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Freya.
That's actually where is it the Aesir? The Ace is actually where Asgard comes from,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
Asgard
then,
or whatever.
Asgard, and then the home of the Vanir is Vanaheim.
Vanaheim, yeah, exactly. But I mean, like again, so you have those giant or those gods, sorry, which are the primary gods of Norse mythology. But then, of course, one of their arch enemies are the Jotun, the frost giants, and the fire giants. So they have these. Both of them have these families and collections of gods which they worship. But then their mortal enemies are the giants that live elsewhere and come to wreak havoc and destroy our towns and stuff. It's an interesting kind of comparison between the two. I would put money. I don't know if there's research done into this to see is there a cultural exchange of ideas there that led to that. But I would say that I'd put money on it that there would be something similar.
Yeah, considering like Celtic culture originated from the Latin area, sort of Central European, and kind of spread out that way through to Ireland. So like a lot of like Celtic, there's a lot of crossover in that kind of area, like the Germanic areas that kind of would have spread out and then probably just diversified and stuff. Like there's like that's why there's a bunch of different things. Like people, I won't get into it because it's not related to giants, but we'll keep going with the giants.
We should talk about migration patterns and cultural stuff because in some like maybe map planning or something like that podcast episode, because that stuff keeps me up at night and it's not healthy. But I love it so much. I love thinking about how, like, whenever you talk about like Game of Thrones, you talk about how the first men and then the Andals come afterwards, and that's essentially the Anglo-Saxons and stuff like that coming in and destroying all the Celtic. The old men are the Celts in Britain and Ireland, and then the Anglo-Saxons coming in is the Andals and stuff like that. So it's essentially migration and cultures merging or destroying one another and all this kind of stuff. Won't get into it now. Anyway, moving on.
No, yeah, but I suppose just real quick run through all the various kinds of giants that we have in D&D. Your core types would be at the top you got your storm giant, then below them is the cloud giant, then below them is the mountain stone giant. Sorry, isn't it?
No, I think it goes storm top, cloud. I think it's fire, frost, stone, hill.
That's it. Sorry, that's it. Yeah. I literally reread it over that a second ago and probably took it up wrong. But yeah, that's the general ordering. And then you've got some giants from other books that are like super, super interesting. That are Theros, I thought would be a good thing to bring up. And you were just talking about like the Cyclopses in Greek mythology. A theory for how Cyclopses came about in Greek mythology is that the theory is that people found the bones of elephants.
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
We did. I think we totally did. And that big gap for the trunk, and said, of course, it's an eyeball.
It's a socket for an eye. Yeah.
But you with Theros, because Theros is basically Magic the Gathering, but Greek mythology, but now D&D.
Yeah.
In Theros, there's not a whole pile of new giants, but there's two, and I think they're really, really cool. So the first one you get from Theros is what's called the Doomwake giants, and they're, like in Theros, it's really cool because so much of Theros is based about like belief, and like piety and what you believe in, and what a Doomwake giant is. So I'll just read it here. A spectrum of giants claim territory across Theros, drawing strength from aspects of the world itself, from ancient stone and roiling flames to the depths of the seas and skies. Unlike many creatures of legend, most giants owe their existence not to Nyx and the dreams of mortals, but to natural forces in the land. As a result, Theron giants are typically infused with the elements they embody, which might manifest as flaming beards, frozen skin, hair crackling with lightning, or other primal incarnations. Beyond these primal giants, though, other giants fill the tales of Theros. And then we get to the Doomwake giant, which is basically it's a giant capable of bringing about like wonders and changing the world, but not always for the better. Doomwake giants arise from pernicious fears that infect a whole city or region. If enough mortals dread destruction for long enough, their terror can manifest as one of these massive Nyx-born beings. Once unleashed, a Doomwake giant goes on a rampage, fulfilling prophecy mortals believed it into being. After doing so, these terrors typically roam to the edges of the world, where they either fade away over time or become legends that take on their own terrible life. I love the idea of like an apocalypse giant that's been made because so many people are all just like, oh god, we're gonna die.
Yeah, it's there's that kind of element of taking on aspects of things going on around them and stuff like that. trolls in D&D do that an awful lot. So
Yes.
trolls are one of my favorite enemies to use, by the way.
The dire troll is really freaking cool as well.
Yeah,
If
but they do a similar thing where they can kind of adapt, and like that's great about them is that the way I see it is that they're so actively mutagenic because they regenerate so much that like there was a thing in Mass Effect 2, and I forget what they're called. I think they're called the Vorcha. I could be wrong on that. They're like this really scrappy kind of toothy, weird, kind of semi-primitive alien race, and they haven't evolved in thousands of years because they have this thing where they'll evolve rapidly, but their genome is otherwise static. So, like, if they get in an environment where they suddenly need to breathe, they will sprout gills. But only that one guy sprouts gills, and he does not pass on gills to his kids. He can adapt in the moment, but over long periods of time, they have no evolving genome, which is really cool. But that's how I see trolls in D&D, is that they are, because they're so rapidly regenerating all the time, that if you introduce them into an environment that has a certain aspect, like it's not like poisonous or it's watery, they might sprout gills or fins, or if it's poisonous, maybe they'll themselves will become poisonous, like the venom troll or something like that. And I think it's really, really cool. And again, like the Doomwreck giant, what was the two you had? Doomwreck, and what was it on?
There's the Doomwake giant, and then the one I haven't gotten to yet, which is the 100-handed one, which are these.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They're these like huge giants, which are these are actually much closer to what giants were like in Greek mythology. Because there were giants that had like 100 heads and 100 arms in Greek mythology, and that's why these guys are the 100-handed ones. They're basically these enormous giants that have these like additional sets of arms and hands that like float around them and are like connected to them, and they can control all of them, and they're like known for being like phenomenal smiths and stone workers and stuff like that. And I just love that, like that's like just a level of detail and putting that in straight from the actual Greek mythology of like the 100-handed. I think they were called the 100-handed ones as well, but they were like giant, or it may have just been one giant with like 100 heads and 100 hands. I think sorry, that was it. There was one giant in particular. I can't remember his name though. But he had like
that's the same with the Cyclops though. The Cyclops wasn't a race of giants; it was a single creature called the Cyclops.
Yes.
Same thing with a bunch of ones like that. I think were centaurs, or was it the centaur, a single person?
Centaurs were things, or like a race.
Multiple.
Centaurs were like a species, but yeah, the Cyclops was the Cyclops, and
the Cyclops. Yeah.
And there was the 100-handed one as well, but there was a giants were in Greek mythology as well. But yeah, those two are really, really awesome. I think then we were talking about before we started recording, but you were saying Ravnica as well.
Yeah, I'd have to. One second, I can just double check very quickly.
I believe there are Bloodfray or Blood Fury giants. They're one of the two. I think it's Bloodfray.
Yeah, and I want to say there's something that has like some aspect of technology, like he's a technological kind of thing.
I think, aren't they a part of the Rakdos carnival or the Rakdos
Quite
cult?
Possibly.
See, I've been running a very giant based arc in my campaign for the last while, so I've been just constantly like filter to giants, scroll, look for enemies.
Okay, so yes, you have the Bloodfray giant. There's a Guardian giant. The one I'm thinking of is the Nivix Cyclops, which has like has armor, and it has like a few other kind of technological kind of things within its image. There's an Orzhov giant, a Sunder shaman, which sounds unreal, and there's someone here named who is legendary, whose name is Borborigmus. I'm probably saying that wrong. Okay. Don't at me, Magic fans. And there's a few different ones, but like one thing I'll say about, because as much as I love giants, and like giants in my own homebrew world, actually, okay, when I was reading up for the podcast today, of course I was going through the creation myth of Faerun and stuff like that, and how they created. I have it here. What's the name of it? It's called Ostoria.
Yes.
And their
citadel,
kingdom, their empire. And I was reading up about all that, and I realized I've inadvertently made my creation myth very similar to that of the giants in Faerun, and now I'm like, well, gotta rewrite the foundations of my world now.
That's always a rough conclusion to come to, isn't it?
I do have to think. I sometimes turn away from things. I sometimes don't engage with things because I'm like, if I like this too much, or if I read or listen or watch this thing, it might poke holes in my own belief, in my own like creation myth or my own setting in my world, and I want to change something. I'm probably going to do a big thing like that after our current campaign anyway. I'm gonna, like I mentioned before, I'm going to flashpoint my world.
Yes.
So things are mostly the same, but kind of different.
The kind of as a brief tangent, but the most hilarious example of something like that, where you write something or you make something, you're like, this is great, I love this, and then you find there, you're like, oh, I've just like replicated something. Oh, no wonder it's good. But yeah, I remember I was like my late teens, I was over at my cousin's house, and he was like, oh man, my cousin fancied himself a songwriter, and he was like, oh man, check it out, I've been writing, I wrote this like riff for a song that I really, really liked, do you want to hear it? And I was like, yeah, go on. And he played it, and he was playing it on an acoustic guitar, and it was literally the opening riff to Wheels by Foo Fighters. And I let him play it, and he was like, what do you think? And I was like, yeah, it's really good. Did I show you something? And he was like, yeah. I took out my phone, Wheels by Foo Fighters, hit play, and he was like, like, god damn it. Like, he was sulking for a good hour after that.
I've done that a few times, like when you think, oh yeah, like I'm onto something here. This is really interesting. And you don't have a reference point in your head for it, so you're like, yeah, I'm obviously just coming up with this myself.
Yeah.
And then you'll read or watch some mythology or video about Tolkien lore or something like that, and you'll go, oh crap, I accidentally remembered this, but thought that I was coming up with it for the first time. I've done that loads.
In relation to that happening in D&D, if you ever feel bad about that happening when you're writing stuff for D&D, don't be, because if you look back into Silmarillion, there is a giant horrible guard dog that guards Morgoth's citadel. I can't remember its exact name, but basically in the final battle, it like swallows, I believe, one of the Silmarils, and then just goes mad. It starts burning him alive from the inside, and he goes on a terrible rampage. That's literally what happens to Fenrir's children in at the end of Norse mythology. One of them swallows the sun. Like, so
yeah, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I love Tolkien, I love what he created, he was incredibly thorough. I'm doing a lot of investigation into Beleriand, is it called, recently.
Yes.
The sunken part of the continent. I'm doing a lot of delving into that. The utmost respect for Tolkien, amazing world, love the Lord of the Rings, absolutely fantastic. The man mostly ripped off Norse mythology and has made it his own.
Heavily inspired by.
Heavily inspired by. But yeah, I mean,
but
again,
so is literally.
I think he made it his own, and I think that's perfectly fine. And you can't really. You can't be sued for ripping off mythology because it isn't owned by anybody.
I would be hesitant to call it a rip-off. I think we're being a little ungenerous to old JRR there.
No. Like, to be fair, like I said, he adapted things very well, and okay, there was definitely some key elements like elves, dwarves, giants, stuff like that. And the gods are kind of very similar to the Norse gods and stuff like that in some ways.
Down to being called the Valar and the Maiar, the Valar and the Maiar. That's it.
Yeah. And so there's a lot there, but at the same time, like when you look at okay, so if you take those kind of key elements and kind of pop them down on the map, they probably make up like some of the foundation building blocks. But what he did then was he wrote thousands of years worth of history for kingdoms that rose and fell, that were not, taken from mythology. They were like, I'm going to come up with a kingdom and I'm going to call it this, and it's where elves live. And then suddenly the elves don't live anymore because they're going to fight with the dwarves, and the dwarves moved over here. And then I've all these migration patterns and all these different cities then the war happened here, and that lasted 800 years and blah blah blah. And like he has. So even though he took some core elements from a different thing and incorporated them into the foundations of his world, what he did then, like the literal, like, I think anyone aspire to be J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, holy shit.
But keep in mind, you never will be, because the man did an insane level of world building. Because, like, again, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, I know there are other stories and stuff like that he wrote as well, but of the stories he wrote, the stories require or incorporate probably only maybe 30%, 40% of the actual world and the realm that he wrote. There's places like, again, Beleriand is a whole whole extra part. So when you go to the Grey Havens, and that's like the coast, that wasn't always coast, that was Midlands. because there used to be a whole other chunk of continent over there that stretched out for the distance between the Grey Havens or the Blue Mountains and the Misty Mountains. There was a whole section that size on the opposite side of the Blue Mountains that stretched out further into the coast, and that sank into the ocean in the First Age. And like, so like, but again, that's like thousands of years before the Lord of the Rings ever began. Why would you ever need to write that? That's insane. Go to bed, or you're tired. It's Sunday night. You work in the morning. Go to bed, and then there's just like, but he did, and like honestly, when you read up on it, there's some great stories and history to that whole part of the world that, again, you would never even think to touch on, even when reading the books and stuff like that. It's just not even relevant to some of the stories he was telling, but he wrote it anyway.
I absolutely love The Children of Huron. That's a great book. I really like that book.
I'm not familiar.
It's the one with like the black blade and that it's the one where the cover is the guy with like a golden helmet inside profile, and he's got like the sword with his hand in his pommel. It came out like as a book. I think it was Christopher Tolkien like edited it and released it.
Yeah.
But Tolkien, awesome. Don't ever feel bad if some of your stuff is similar to other stuff or you're heavily inspired by something, because Tolkien did it and he's literally the OG, the number one.
Particularly because we are working off of, we're all playing the same game. We're all playing D&D. Even however different you want to make your world, and however off the walls and changed culture, changed the technology, changed the way magic works, whatever. The further at the end of the day, you have an anchor point that you can only go so far from, because you have a DMG and you have a monster manual and stuff like that. And like, unless you want to write every single monster from scratch, you kind of got to have a world where there are elves, and you kind of got to have a world where there are chimera and giants and dragons and all that kind of stuff. We're anchored by that and limited by that. So I don't know what my point was there. I'm just saying that we can only go so far, so don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. You can only get so far from the wheel when you're talking about a 5th edition homebrew world.
Totally.
I went off on a weird tangent there, sorry, about homebrew and lore and all that stuff. We've been talking about giants.
We're known for our tangents. We're tangents.
Nice.
But what I wanted, you actually mentioned something that I wanted to hit on for this episode of the podcast, which was the ever so famous war between the dragons and the giants. You mentioned Osteria. That's it. That's the name is Osteria, isn't it?
Osteria, yeah.
Which was in
Astoria,
the Astoria, sorry, yeah. Asteria is our world.
Asteria was the Titan in Greek mythology, was the Titan goddess of stars and the night sky and stuff. I think of premonition as well. And I named my previous homebrew world Eos just because it sounded like a cool name. Again, here's an example of me taking something, not realizing it's a real thing, and I called it Eos as a name for it, and then it turns out Eos is like the dawn. I think he's the dawn god or something like that in the Titan pantheon. And then when I was trying to come up with names for this world, I was like, I like Asteria because it's like Aster, like star, you know. And I think they'll have the stars play like an important aspect to that, and then it turns out Asteria is actually just a goddess of twilight and stars and other stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, do you know what? I'm going to stick with that because it's kind of funny that I've accidentally come up with two names that are both Titan gods in that pantheon. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, no, it's called Asteria, and we're sticking with it.
Yeah. But Astoria, which would be the giants' former homeland and empire, was actually destroyed by dragons in the final climactic battle of the dragon and giant war. Is that the Titan? No, never mind. Do you know what? God, names that stuff. But giants and dragons, legendary enemies in D&D, to the point where giant. Sorry.
No, sorry. You go on. There's a great image. I have. I think it's in photos. I have it open in front of me here. I'm just gonna check. Yeah. You work away. I'm gonna see if I can find it. It's a giant. Oh, it's actually it's not a dragon, but it's I think it's a Raymoraz. But it's a really awesome.
Ooh, show.
Image of the two.
Oh, of them. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a Raymoraz. Yeah. Oh God, I remember Raymoraz.
If you picture that as a dragon,
Yeah, totally. Well, sorry, I got sidetracked by that awesome Raymoraz picture. But with giants basically got so sick of dragons shit that they went, this thing looks like a giant. This thing called a behir. Not a giant, sorry, a dragon. This thing looks like a dragon, but it isn't as much of an asshole as a dragon. Let's make these our pets and train them to instinctively hate dragons. To the point that it's, even now, if a behir and a dragon set up in the same area, the behir is just like overtaken by instinct to go and fight the dragon. Like, I love that. I love that so much. That's like something that happened so long ago and was so prevalent so long ago, but it's just been carried down now through instinct. These things like instinctually hate dragons and will seek them out and fight them. That's just like a free license to set up a kaiju battle in your D&D world.
I was only thinking about it today, like how cool, and maybe I had this image in the back of my head, like how cool would it be, not even like just as a set piece, your heroes are on their way from one town to another, and in the distance you watch this enormous like serpentine thing like climbing up along the mountain like that, and all of a sudden a dragon comes down and catches it, and they start reeling around each other and biting each other. But here's are really cool. They look like dragons, but they're actually monstrosities, which is weird.
So, yeah.
They're fun. You guys fought a couple of them once in the previous campaign.
We did.
Where you managed, so there was two of them, and they were like, I think they were like sisters, and I had them that had to do like really snaky kind of voices and stuff, and they were fighting. But what she did was he polymorphed one of them into like a rat, and then you asked me like, can I throw this into the mouth of the other one so it swallows it? And I was like, and I was like, make an attack roll or whatever. And then you got like really high, so I'm like, yeah, you throw it in, and it goes, and it swallows the rat. And then on its next turn, it immediately starts taking acid damage from being inside the stomach. So it drops the 1 hit point the rat has. And then we had this weird thing where a thing that's the same size as the thing that is, it's like, imagine if you ate, if a person just grew in your stomach to full 6 foot size, like just bang like that. So we had this snake creature going through this other snake creature because it had just burst out of its stomach, and they were like, couldn't get out of one another because they're like, there's just a hole in their chest, and they're going through front to back and stuff. We'd
like conjoined behir twins basically by the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of tied themselves in a knot through the stomach area. It was a bizarre fight.
That was one of the cooler things that Shamash did in that D&D campaign, though. It was just, polymorph into a mouse, catch it, throw it into the other one's mouth. Let's go.
It was And reduce and enlarge. What a spell!
Oh, right? Yeah. It's such
Actually,
a
I'm thinking of a different. I think he did some other stuff with reduce and enlarge in that one as well.
We did some other.
This specifically was polymorph, but also it's a great spell.
Yeah, but I suppose just in terms of the lore and stuff that I like there, I just love that the whole giant behir relationship and like training them like guard dogs to attack giants. Like I would love to do a thing eventually. I just thought of it would be such a cool set piece where, so I'd say the party have to save a village. But the reason they have to save the village is because the village is situated equidistant between the lair of a dragon and the lair of a giant with a behir. And they're coming to fight, and they're going to meet in the middle. And you guys have to stop it.
That'd be really cool.
That would be so... Oh my god, that would be such a fun one-shot. Speaking of which, we talked about one-shots 2 weeks ago. So absolutely check that out.
It was 2 weeks ago. I had to think about that for a second.
We did group patrons last week, which you should also check out, because group patrons are dope.
They are. That's a very cool idea for a one shot. Someone, I can't remember if it was in the book I was reading earlier, or did I watch a video about it? Someone brought up cloud giants and how they're kind of your typical giant that lives on a castle on a cloud and usually get a beanstalk to get up to her.
Yeah.
And like how cool of that'd be a great one shot as well. Like, there is a bean, like you could arrive as adventurers. I did this a couple of times in the previous campaign where I incorporated some fairy tale stuff.
Yes.
So, for example, you met a girl named Redna who was actually Little Red Riding Hood, who instead of just killing the wolf and saving her grandmother and then living happily ever after, she kind of like goes, oh no, I like killing wolves, I like killing werewolves, let's fucking do this shit. And then she became a blood hunter and had like the lichen. She got bit at one point, and she'd like tamed the lichen, lycanthropy in herself and all that. But a cool one to do is like, what if your players show up to a village and from miles away they can see there is a beanstalk going right up to the top of the sky, and it's a guy there, and his name is Jack, and he's like, "Oh man, I do not know what happened. I bought some beans from this gnome trader who was passing through town. He said plant them, and they'll grow a nice big plant, and they'll feed your whole family. And next thing I know, there's a 200-foot tall beanstalk here, and then see that, and he points at a castle on a cloud. Then that collided with the beanstalk. Giant came down, wasn't happy, took the blacksmith's daughter. That's where we're at.
I need to check it, but I'm like 99% certain that the bag of beans magic item in D&D, I'm 90% certain that one of the beans, if one of the options you can get for the beans is it immediately spawns a beanstalk with a cloud giant living on top. I'm gonna pull that up real quick because I'm so sure of it.
Very familiar.
I'm so sure of it. Hang on. Yes, when you throw the way the bag of beans works is there's 3d4 dry beans in there, and then depending on how many you have, you can take them out and you can either you can dump the bag out and it causes an explosion, which is the most boring thing to do. But the really cool thing you can do with the bag of beans is you can take it from the bag, plant it in dirt or sand, and water it, and it makes an effect for 1 minute later in the ground wherever it's planted. And either the DM can choose an effect from the table, or you can roll it randomly or create a whole new effect. But if you roll, right, so you roll 2d10, you roll your percentile dice rather. And there's some normal stuff like, just some stuff like, oh, a campfire with blue flames springs forth and burns for 24 hours. Useful, cool, not that impressive. If you roll 100, a giant beanstalk sprouts, growing to the height of the GM's choice. The top leads to where the GM chooses, such to as a great view, a cloud giant's castle, or a different plane of existence.
That's really, really cool.
I love the bag of beans. I think I gave my party a bag of beans. No, I gave them the russet bag of tricks because I do not trust my party with a bag of beans.
I like those random magic items sometimes. Like sometimes it's nice to go, here's a sword, it's +2, knock yourself out, and you know exactly what it does. That's great. But there is times when you're like, here's a deck of many things, or a bag of beans, or whatever, something random.
The gambler's blades. The gambler's blades are great for that.
But there's almost a level of like, I'm just going to leave this object, which is potentially very good or very bad, on the table, and you guys do what. I have no part in this. Whatever happens from here on out is not my problem. I'm not touching it. That's on you. And then and there's a level of like of no responsibility or no ownership on the part of the DM, because they're like, but of course I gave them the magic item, but I mean I didn't tell them to use it.
Yeah. And it's a random table. It's a random table. It's not my fault.
Exactly. Yeah, the dice. I didn't make a beanstalk with a cloud giant who wants to kill your whole party.
Probability made a beanstalk that wants to kill your party.
Exactly. That's just called bad luck. Sorry, the dice. Ooh, bad. Sorry.
Yeah. But like, I would love. That would be such a great way to start an adventure, actually. Because I remember, like, in the previous game we played in together, one of our party members, Atsila, she had a bag of beans. And she threw one out once. She didn't roll 100, but what she did roll was like between 91 and 99, because a 60-foot tall pyramid sprouted out of the ground where the...
I was actually gone for that, but...
Oh, okay, sorry.
I remember you telling me about it.
Yeah, a 60-foot pyramid sprouted out of the ground that we didn't know had a mummy lord in it that my character encountered first with his face.
Did that pyramid also end up having like was it like a flying pyramid that have a control room and you could like fly at places?
It did! It did. I completely forgot about that. It did, yeah. It was a spaceship. It was, and I don't think we ever got to using it much. But like, yeah, it was a spaceship as well.
Depending on the speed of that thing, I would just be like, yeah, sure, let's give everyone a room in the pyramid, and this is our flying mobile pyramid base now, and then we're just to go town to town doing adventures.
I think that was the plan, and I think we also discussed the possibility of flying it over a city that we were trying to invade and just dropping it on it.
That would also work.
Kill the engine.
A 60 by 60 area that would just immediately be crushed.
Yeah, just kill the engine. Just kill the engine. Let the pyramid fall.
There is something I wanted to talk about with regards to giants, and I think I brought it up in our dragons video before as well. And there is a template that tends to be followed when it comes to giants.
Yes.
Which is typically strength is going to be 20 plus. Typically, a metric ton of health points.
Con probably 20 plus as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You have the ability, or you have like one melee weapon, and then you throw rocks.
Yes.
And that's kind of the same thing a lot of the giants follow. Some of them have different resistances. Some of them have a couple of spells they can cast, but not many. So like storm giants, I know are amphibious, so they can breathe the water and stuff like that.
Fire giants
There's
are
some,
immune to fire damage.
yeah. There's and they have a very high armor class as opposed to like stone giants have it as well. I think 16 is all that a frost giant has, or something like that.
Frost giant has like scale or something like that.
Yeah, hill giants don't have much
Nope.
AC, but because they're just big sacks of hit points. But it's the same problem I encounter with dragons, where they're too similar. And like, because again, I mentioned it before in the dragons video we did. Feel free to go and watch that; it's on our channel. With dragons, as like, okay, you're playing your typical D&D campaign, right? You're in Faerun. We're not changing the lore or mixing things up too much. You see a red dragon fly over the city and start burning stuff. Immediate thoughts, because if you played D&D even once before, okay, nobody use fire weapons or fire spells, and everyone take your potions of fire resistance / put on your fire resistant armor. And then of course with a dragon you're like, okay, it's got flying, it's got a breath weapon, it's got tail, claws, bite,
Wing attack.
I think that's it. Wing attack. Thank you.
And what's the presence one?
Frightening presence.
That's it.
Yeah. And barring what type of breath weapon they have, because sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's a cone, the elements differ, and also what element they are resistant to as well, which is almost always going to be the same. I think typically it is the same always.
I think it almost always is. Yeah.
Yeah. My problem with that when it comes to giants then is that they follow a very similar thing, where you go frost, you go fire, you go storm, barring a difference in hit points, a difference in AC, not by much. They're always going to have a rock throw attack, and they're going to have a melee weapon attack of some kind that will do a ton of damage. And it's just, I just wish that there was more variety to them. Now, in Volo's guide, they have these greater versions of giants, which I really, really like, and I kind of wish the base giants were like this.
I got to use one last night as a base for a boss fight. I got basically a fire giant leader that one of my PCs was in direct conflict with. It was based almost entirely on a fire giant dreadnought, which are these fire giants that carry two huge spiked shields. They have 21 AC. They've like crazy strength and crazy con, and yeah, those bios, those are, yeah, they hit hard.
For audio listeners, just Google fire giant dreadnought.
Yeah, they hit really, really hard. They've got a really cool shield charge ability that can, if you run through a whole party with it and they're not a party of strength users, you can literally shunt the whole party in front of you while you run past the room, and it does a ton of damage. I'm not super familiar with the other ones because I haven't gotten around to using it, but I do know there's like a frost giant. Is it Dreamwalker?
No, the stone giant is Dreamwalker.
Sorry.
The frost giant is the everlasting one.
That's it. Yeah.
So that's a prime example you mentioned there about the shield charge, right? That's because these guys carry two shields. It makes sense that they would be able to do a charge attack and put both shields up and push you and force you away. I really, really like that. Mm-hmm. I wish standard frost giants or fire giants had that, and then this had something more on top of it. You know?
Yeah.
And there's a cloud giant smiling one who gets access to a bunch of different spells that are kind of air and charm related spells. They can also change shape as well, so I'm like, that's really cool. I wish that was a kind of standard cloud giant thing. We talked about the dreadnought. The everlasting one has multiple heads, so it has that thing where it can't be blinded because it has an extra head that can still see. It also regenerates. Do the other ones regenerate? They do not, just that one. And then it has a rage. It can go into a rage like a barbarian.
Yeah,
I love that.
Is the Demogorgon on that section you're looking at? We talked about it a few weeks back because I used it in the boss fight.
Is this the Stranger Things one?
No. We had this almost exact conversation when I brought it up last week. So it's literally written as like air quotes the Demogorgon. It's a what are the two-headed giants? The
Ettins.
It's an
you did.
It's an Ettin that thinks it's the Demogorgon, and it can breathe fire and ice breath.
Yeah. Again, that's if you did not know that was a thing, right? And then you run into an Etten, and you're like, okay, it's got 2 heads, we can't blind it, that's fair enough. But it has 2 clubs, will try and keep her distance or whatever. It'd be amazing then if you're like, okay, so on its first turn, it breeds both fire and ice at you. You'd be like, what?
That's almost exactly what happened, because my party had encountered an Etten at an arena before. I think I think they saw someone else fight Netten, and someone rolled like a nature check or an arcana check to figure out what it was, and I explained what Netten was. So like then when they heard like, oh, the boss of the slave, the guys who run the slave mine here are the Etten twins. So I put them up against 2 of those, the Demogorgon.
Right.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun, because first they were like, okay, yeah, let's go in and melee these guys, because they carried massive clubs, and I was like, all right, the first one does is breathe fire on you, and they were like, what? And then second one come around and like, okay, this one's going to do a breath attack on you again, and they're all like, oh god, fire again. I was like, no, this one's ice.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's a prime example. I just wish there was a bit more variety in the template that they use.
Yeah.
What else? We have the Mouth of Crolanthor, which is the hill giant variant. That one has a thing called Mouth of Madness. This giant is immune to confusion spells and similar magic. On each of its turns, the giant uses all of its movement to move towards the nearest creature, or whatever else it might perceive as food. Roll a d10 at the start of each of the giant's turns to determine the action it takes. On a 1-3, the giant makes 3 attacks with its fists against 1 random target within reach. If no other creatures are within reach, the giant flings into a rage and gains advantage on all attack rolls until the end of its next turn.
That's awesome.
That's like super, super dangerous as well. And again, it does that thing where it's like, oh, the DM isn't responsible. It's a table. It's going to act. It's a crazy, creature that's going to eat and destroy everything it sees. So I can't be held responsible.
I feel like that is like the random table is your like liability waiver as a DM in D&D.
Yeah. It's like the dice did it. I didn't.
Yeah.
Roll a new character. I'm sorry, the dice wanted you to die today.
Yeah, curse your own fate for that one.
So the Stone Giant Dreamwalker has a thing where, again, they have their club, they have their rock, but they can do a petrifying touch on you as well. And then the Storm Giant Quintessent has so they're a legendary creature. They have a lightning sword that does 9d6 plus 9 lightning. It's just made of lightning.
That's so cool.
They have a thing called Wind Javelin, which it only does 3d6 plus 9 damage.
Don't care. Sounds awesome.
Let's see now. It's actually made of wind, and they can hurl it up to 600 feet.
Oh god, they're so cool. They're so cool.
Yeah.
I wish my party were higher enough level.
And a swim speed. So they have land, swimming, and flying all 50 feet.
So they're an ATG, all-terrain giant.
They're an all-terrain giant, yes. Then they also have legendary actions to cast Gust. They can throw thunderbolts. They can become one with the storm, where they disperse into the storm itself. Again, I know some of those are legendary actions, and I wouldn't expect that every giant would have legendary actions. But the more and more I look at certain classes of monsters in D&D, the more that I'm like, I wish that they would add a bit more variety. That you didn't just go, right, all giants should be this. Now let's make them different colors and give them different elements.
Yeah,
it's kind of boring, At
a
certain point,
it does feel a tiny bit palette swappy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, I think all of these kind of elevated ones, the Quintessent, the Dreamwalker, all that, I think they're all fantastic. I wish the base ones had the same level of difference that they could shake it up and stuff like that. And then again, add more on after the fact if you want to create a different classes and all that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, like I said, it's not the worst thing in the world. We still get great fun out of dragons. It's still, even though giants are kind of just big bags of hit points, and that both take and dish out a lot of damage. I don't think it's as big. I don't think it's a big problem. I think anytime I've introduced a giant, it's always been a pretty excellent fight. Again, I just wish that I had some reactions and some bonus actions, or I wish they had the ability to, for example, that Mouth of Crolanthor one, for example. Hill giants are all about like consuming. They just want to eat and get fat and all that kind of stuff. You should totally be able to swallow. They should have a swallow ability. They don't have that, but they should totally have a swallow ability.
Yeah.
I remember I did make a frost giant shaman in
Yes,
the first
you did.
campaign once.
You did.
I wish there was kind of stuff like that where you can, he was like a druid, but he had all ice spells. Yeah, I just wish there was more to it. Is all. That's my only real criticism. Other than that, I really like running them. I think they're very fun. I particularly like them because they're just, like I said, mad sacks of hit points, and they tend to last a while.
Yeah.
And I think again appropriately scaling them. So a 15th level going up against a storm giant as opposed to just one hill giant. I think that when you get to a certain level, or when you go up against a giant, the terror is always there.
They have a presence for sure. Like there's just because of
would you
their
say they have
size.
a frightful presence?
No, because dragons have that. Hey.
I was just going to say
there is actually just to bring up the Doomwake giant again. So the Doomwake giant actually does have something similar to that. It's called Aura of Erebos. Erebos. Any creature that starts turn within 10 feet of the giant must succeed a DC 18 con save or take 3d6 necrotic damage and can't regain hit points until the start of its next turn. On a successful save, it's immune to that for 24 hours. So literally the exact same kind of rule set as the Frightening Presence for dragons.
See, that's really, really good. And
he also
that actually kind of plays into what I was going to say next, which is that, okay, so we're looking at our core giants there, right? There are our frost, our storm, our fire, whatever.
Yeah.
The reason I like trolls so much is because there's such a big variety in trolls. So the standard troll is big. It has a regeneration ability, which is cool. And fun thing, the regeneration thing means they gain hit points back unless they take acid or fire damage on a turn.
Yeah.
But change it. Always, if you're putting a party up against it, just change it. Change whatever damage type you want. Doesn't matter, because
and then change the color of the troll, and it'll make sense.
Yeah, just change it. They can still be a green troll with like a long nose and pointy teeth or whatever. The point is though, like, because I actually went up against, I played a game once where we as the party were defending some villagers that were out on the road in wagons, and we went up against 3 of them, and like some of us, like I knew what the resistance or what the thing was, what the key element type was. Mm-hmm. And I was also the wizard, but I'm like, I'd be metagaming if I did it, so I won't rush it. I will use a couple different types of things first, or maybe I can't remember what I did. Did I roll intelligence checks for myself? And I said, until I get like higher than 15, I won't allow myself to know that as a character or something like that. I forget what I did. I tried to basically stem my own metagaming. But then when I actually got around to using fire, I hit them with fire, and then the DM was like, yeah, he still seems to regenerate. And I was like, what? Oh, okay. And that totally caught me off guard, but I loved it because I'm like, that's brilliant. Because I don't want to know. I wish I could erase it from my head, because the guessing and trying to figure it out is way more fun.
Yeah, I wish fire wasn't in there. If it was just acid, I think I'd like it. Like, I know why fire's in there, because in like traditionally fancy fires, like you like for example, when Hercules is fighting the Hydra, he had his nephew hold a torch to the severed stumps to stop them from going back to cauterize the wound. Like, it's the same logic for trolls. But like, the problem is, right, with D&D, if you have any kind of spellcaster in your party, they have a fire spell. It's very, very likely they have a fire spell.
That's kind of why fire is one of the most common damage types after bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing.
Yep.
So I think they put it in there specifically because they're like, we don't want for.
I suppose
we want for parties that to be accessible, But I kind of like the idea of, or do you know what? Even, I'm gonna say this now, and I won't be able to do it if I say it. But
I think it'd make more sense for cold to do that to their regeneration.
That's the damage type the DM actually changed it to for us.
Oh, because like if you think about it, like if you freeze cells, it stops them from growing. Like it's the same. It's the same thing as like stopping them from decaying. Like if you freeze it, you basically stop any kind of thing. So like, yeah, fire would cauterize the wound, all right. But like, why couldn't it just like, yeah, the wound's cauterized, cool. It can heal over the cauterization and go back. Like, it regenerates.
Yeah. I think I just thought of something there, and it's pure DM evilness, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Take out the damage thing. They just keep regenerating. Trolls don't die of trolls can only die of natural causes. They either die of old age, but they never actually. They can be wounded, but they will always heal themselves. So that would be amazing. So
in this case, does the party win by just like dismembering the troll and like taking all its bits and moving them away from each other?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if the party's like, if I say, "Oh, you get a crit," you slice his arm off, and you say, "Can I use my next attack to grab the arm and then run as far as I can away from it?" I'd be like, "Yes, you can." That'd be amazing. But I think that'd be great. If again, it all comes down to like, do you have a new party? In which case, by all means, do the fire and acid thing. But if you don't, if you have a very experienced party and they know all this stuff, try and trick them.
I think
there's also, but
sorry, I was just going to say, I think if it's a new party, I think the fire and acid thing is still fun though, because invariably you'll get a round or two of it regenerating before they're like, oh, fire, okay.
Yeah, and then you'll have players that are hopefully you'll have players that aren't just casting spells but are looking through their packs and going, oh, I have a tinderbox here. I'm gonna gather up as much branches, or I'm gonna grab a branch from a tree and try to light the top of it so I can swing it like a torch. Yeah, I'm gonna or light a torch and see if I can just jab it with the burning torch to try and damage it that way instead. I think that'd be amazing. And there's the trolls. That's a standard troll with Mordenkainen and Stone of Foes and a couple other ones. They actually introduce a whole host more trolls.
And so just to be clear, trolls are giantkin, so we're not going off topic.
Oh yeah, trolls are giant in this. Yeah, they're the same as Cyclopses, Ettins, Fomorians, and all that kind of stuff. They're all part of the giant family. There's venom trolls, which I really like. They have a thing where
they're so cool. They're so goddamn cool, and they're just
really really cool.
Fun update to the troll. But please do educate our listeners there.
So basically, whenever the troll takes damage of any type, except but psychic, each creature within 5 feet just takes 2d8 poison damage, because this is a creature whose blood has, again, that kind of mutation thing. Their blood has mutated into poisonous blood. It doesn't affect them. They're immune to poison, I believe they are, yeah. But what happens is if you slice them and cut them, there's, instead of blood splattering in your face, it's like poison ichor is splattering in your face, so you take damage as well.
It's like fighting it's like fighting the alien.
Basically, yeah. So that's really, really cool. There's another one here that's a rot troll. It doesn't have a regeneration thing. Instead, it has what's called rancid degeneration. At the end of the troll's turn, each creature within 5 feet takes 2d8 necrotic damage. So instead of regenerating on its turn, it degenerates everyone around it on its turn. And that's just passive, but that doesn't require an attack or anything, which is really cool. There's ice trolls. I don't think they have anything in particular. Oh wait, no, sorry, I clicked into the same one again. There's ice trolls. They have a cold aura. They do have regeneration. There's 4-armed trolls and dire trolls. It's a spirit troll.
The dire
which is
troll,
incorporeal.
The dire troll is because I was looking into trolls a lot when I was doing this, but like the dire troll is particularly cool because I believe a dire troll is a troll that ate a giant.
I'd have to check the.
I think it's either.
Another troll.
That's it. Sorry,
trolls kill and eat almost anything, including in rare cases other trolls. This cannibalism has the effect of causing a troll to grow to unusual size. These dire trolls crave more and more flesh to fuel their continued growth. They're like a size huge. They have. Let's see now. They have regeneration as well. Mm-hmm. They have a whirlwind ability, which oh my god, it's a 8d10 slashing. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So that's really cool though. So they basically have multiple arms and they have 5 attacks, 1 bite and 4 with his claws. That's insane.
You want the barbs up front there.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yes. But I mean, like again, so all those different variants of troll. I'm like, I wish the main giants were more like that. Where they were. I think there's so much you could do, particularly with like fire giants. Mm-hmm. I'm like, do you know what I thought of earlier actually? And this kind of comes back around to the whole Norse thing, because typically frost giants are made look like Vikings, like Viking raiders and stuff like that. They have the horned helmets and the axes and stuff. And I just think back to all the scenes I saw in Vikings the show, where they're like shield wall, shield wall. What if your frost giants carried shields and their ability was when there's 2 or more frost giants within 5 feet of each other, they get a bonus to their AC because they're defending each other in a shield wall.
Or like
setup,
if you ever use a stone defender, if it's beside another stone defender, can use its reaction to give the other one +5 AC.
There you go. See, something like applying something like that to it, I think just be amazing, because it just adds an extra layer. And again, I like when there's an extra. I don't know what you call the section. You have you have your name, you have your conditions and skills and all that. And between challenge rating and actions, there's the thing that typically has all the special abilities of a creature.
I think it's called special features.
Special features. Like, the more you can pack into a special features, I don't really care so much about attacks. Attacks are almost always going to be bite, claw, sword, whatever, because that's just D&D. You know, monsters have all those things. But the more you can pack into that section, the more interesting monsters will be. Whether it's a regeneration, whether it's an AC thing, like we talked about there, maybe fire giants. I don't know, maybe a fire giant vomits magma when he's angry or something.
I think it would be cool, and also make sense for fire giants to have like an aura where if you're within 5 feet of them, you take 1d6 fire damage each round, or 2d6 fire damage each round.
And again, even something like that, like that's not part of the standard block. So if you add that in, then even experienced players are going to be caught off guard by that. Maybe they have a temper thing that is like them going into a rage, and when they do so, they genuinely get hotter in temperature. So maybe when they drop below half hit points, then because they're in like death throes or whatever, maybe that 1d6 turns into 2d6 or 3d6, and maybe their weapon doesn't just do slashing damage, it also does fire damage on it as well, because they're getting angrier and angrier as you're fighting them, and they're in that frenzy. And I think that'd be really cool to see that gonna happen. You know?
Yeah, I thought a thought there that I thought would be fun would be like kind of taking inspiration from Surtur from Norse mythology, but like imagine like a fire giant like cleric, where it's like kitted out in like heavy armor, and its mission is just to burn the world to make a new one. Like a
light cleric.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You could like give it like light cleric abilities, but it worships Surtur, and it wants to fulfill his vision of burning the world to make a new one for fire giants.
What spells do you get here now? You get Burning Hands, Fairy Fire, Flame Sphere, Scorching Ray, Daylight, Fireball, yes.
Flame
Guardian of Fate, Wall of Fire, Flame Strike, Scrying. What is the channel divinity on this? As an action, you present a holy symbol and any darkness, any magical darkness within 30 feet of you is dispelled. Additionally, hostile creatures within 30 feet of you must make a Constitution saving throw or take radiant damage equal to 2d10 plus your cleric level. On a failed saving throw, half as much on a success. A creature that has total cover from you is not affected. I mean, again, a once a day or twice a day use of that on a fire giant would be really cool. I think there's some other stuff here. I can't quite remember all what to do. They have a warding flare thing that blinds you if you attack them, I think.
Yeah.
Again, really, really cool. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing they bring up in the EMG, I think, or possibly the Monster Manual. It's been so long since I've read those books properly instead of just flicking to the exact page I know the monster is. But if they recommend giving certain monsters classes as if they were in D&D, as if they were.
I think that's in the D&G or the Monster Manual, yeah. But there's another giant kin that are really, really fun to use, and I really like, and they have more of like a horror element and also an Asian element to them, and they're the Oni. Oni are considered they are giants.
Sorry,
but
I inhaled too fast.
Ooh, I shocked you.
I gasped when you said Oni, and I genuinely kind of coughed on my own breath.
Oni, also known as ogre mages. They are based off of basically demons from Japanese mythology. In Japanese mythology, Oni are demons, and there was a night parade of 100 demons in Japanese mythology. All of these like strange, weird ones. They're really, really fun. They're very spooky. Like literally the very first line of the Oni's description is, "In nursery rhymes, Oni are fearsome boogeymen that haunt the nightmares of children and adults alike. Yet they're very real and always hungry." Like,
yeah, I think so Oni are very, very cool enemy.
Also, the second line is, "They find human babies especially delicious." Yeah, but Oni are awesome. I've used a bunch of Oni in my game. I used them particularly for the kind of Japanese styled area that I was in. They're really great. They've got they're pretty beefy. They've got 19 strength and 16 con. They've also got some pretty good mental stats for a creature: 14 int, 12 whiz, 15 charisma. They've got skills in Arcana, Deception, and Perception, so they're really good. They're intelligent, villains. Even though they're intelligent villains, so they can suss out who's going to be the biggest threat in the party. They've got innate spell casting as well. They're a charisma caster with a spell case save of 13, and they've got some really fun spells. They've got darkness, invisibility, charm person. The darkness and invisibility are at will, by the way. And then once a day, they've got charm person, cone of cold, gaseous form, and sleep. Their weapon attacks are magical, and like the troll, they regain 10 hit points at the start of the turn if it has at least 1 hit point.
That's I think Oni would make for such a what are they? Challenge 7. They make for such a good like 5th to 6th level villain. Like they could be the big bad of an arc so easily because they have so much they can do. Yeah, exactly. They're responsible for killing Mollymock.
Spoiler. Yeah.
But like the shape change thing, I mean, there's so much you can do.
They can do. I had a lot of fun with that, with having Oni be in the town with the party, and they had no idea because they can perfectly shape change into a humanoid. They can do polymorph into a smaller medium humanoid, or into a large giant, or back. They have a nasty glaive as well that hits pretty hard. It hits for 2d10 plus 4 in its humanoid form, or it's 2d10 plus 4 slashing damage in its big form, or 1d10 in its small form, which is crazy. It's got a claw attack that's pretty nasty as well. It hits as hard as a longsword, and it multi attacks with that as well.
Quite a few saving throw proficiencies as well, actually. Dex, Con, Wisdom, and Charisma. That's really good.
They're really fun.
They've got a +8 to Deception.
Yeah.
See, that pairs so well with the shape change thing. Because, like you were saying, you used them in a town and you wouldn't even know they were there. But the thing is, if you thought someone was suspicious, so if you're talking to the Oni and they're trying to play you and trick you into doing something, and you get suspicious and you roll an nat 20 on insight, and the DM's like, this person is definitely trying to mess with you, and you guys try to capture them or kill them, they could run off, turn a corner, transform into someone else, and then you'd lose track of them in the crowd immediately. Like, you wouldn't be able to discern them.
When I used them as like a secret invasion force for a pirate queen. So she sent the Oni in first, and they're so good at being. This is how good at Oni are at shape changing and deception. I had Oni running the hot springs that my party were staying at.
Yeah, that's cool.
And they never knew. They didn't know until it came time to fight them, basically, and they started discovering the plan. Like, they only had like killed the owners of the hot springs, dumped their bodies, and then just impersonated them for months on end.
I had an idea for an Oni arc, that I probably won't get to this campaign, but I'm also not going to say it because I don't want
obviously.
But yeah, I actually have never run them. I don't have used them in combat before.
I'll be honest, I was definitely inspired to use them by Critical Role and seeing them in Critical Role first. I think I might have encountered them in another game once, maybe. But yeah, when I was looking for just Japanese themed monsters, and I knew there was an Oni in D&D, and I was like, perfect. But I didn't realize exactly how great they are. My characters did a particularly messed up thing where they killed it. And then they went, we should have interrogated that guy. Resurrected him with Raise Dead. But before they did that, they cut off all his limbs. So they resurrected him. It heals. Raise Dead will heal all your injuries, but it won't restore limbs. So he came back healed as just a head and torso. And basically, they were interrogating him. And I was like, okay, how long are you going to interrogate this guy for? And they were like, like 10 minutes. I was like, okay. Because the Oni regains 10 hit points each round.
Yeah,
10 minutes is a lot of rounds.
It is.
So he was he had full health, but he had no limbs. So he couldn't really. He all I could do was because he couldn't really cast many spells. All I could do was he cast darkness on the area he was in, because you just need vision. I think you just from modern
line of sight.
Yeah. So he cast darkness, and then he just tried to crawl away.
There is a material component to darkness. I'm looking here at Charm Person. You can do Charm Person one today, and I'm thinking to myself, oh no, the somatic components ignore me.
Yeah,
that wouldn't work.
No, believe me, I spent about a minute going through all the spells going, what can he do? Because he's literally just a head and a body.
That reminds me, and to bring it back full circle to God of War, that reminds me of Mimir.
Yeah.
Like, did they get rid of him in the end?
No, Mimir's still there.
No, sorry, I mean the Oni in your party.
Oh, the Oni. Yeah, no, they killed him pretty quick.
Oh, because I would have been like, I tie his hair in a knot on my belt and I carry him with me, and I'm like, hey, Oni, what do you have to say about this? Okay, and just pop him back in my belt.
As chaotic as my party are, to be honest, I'm kind of shocked. No one thought to do that.
I'm surprised Mike didn't think to do it. That's a very Mike thing to do.
He's the one who thought up about cutting all the limbs off before they brought him back.
So that was his good idea for that session. Okay.
Yeah. Also bringing him back. He was the one who brought the Oni back.
Okay.
I was like, okay, you want to use a diamond worth that much gold? Sure.
I mean, that's really interesting, though. I think that's really cool. And like, I would totally rule that as well because they have the whole regenerative thing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh yeah, they can totally live without a body. They can just be a head. They don't need to eat. They'll just continuously regenerate. I'm like, absolutely. I think that's really funny. Oh wait, they have a fly speed.
They do. They can fly as well. Yeah. Sorry, I left that out.
So couldn't the head have just flown off by itself?
Oh crap! God damn it! Did the body? Like it was he's basically like he was just a head and a torso and no lower body either. Yeah, he could have just flown off in the dark. God damn it, Martin!
That would have been so good. Just a big floating Oni head that just flies around.
I'll get you.
What's it Green Goblin says in the first Sam Raimi one? He's like, I'll see you again, Spider-Man. You haven't seen the last.
Yeah, it is. You haven't seen the last of me.
We'll meet again.
Yeah.
Like it's the most typical villain comic dialogue ever.
Ripped straight from the end of a '60s Spider-Man comic, like.
Yeah, absolutely. But Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have today.
Ooh, man, I love this episode because we got to talk about everything related to giants and a lot of things that aren't related to giants, and it was really fun. Yeah, I find giants incredibly interesting just from like a flavor and thematic perspective. Oh, Vola's Guide, front cover. Also, another book we didn't mention but probably would be really relevant to mention would have been Storm King's Thunder, which is an adventure that goes whole hog through. It's a basically entirely giant-based adventure based on basically the Allfather Annam shatters the Ordnung for all of the lower ranked giants and tells them, reforge your destiny, go and compete with each other.
Yeah.
And they all just go ape. It's really fun.
It's meant to be one of the better ones in terms of plot and stuff like that, and of course you get to fight a ton of giants throughout it, and you get to meet some storm giants. I think it's a storm giant royal family or something like that you get involved with and stuff. It's really interesting.
It's all very fun, very cool.
Very, very cool. Worth just as a little side note. I picked up Vola's Guide. I picked up Vola's Guide in months. This is a great book. Mm-hmm. This bar Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. This is one of the first expansion books that 5e got that wasn't like an adventure. Oh my god, this book! I forget how good this book is, but man, it's just solid. Like, you know. Yeah,
you'd forget which comes from which book sometimes because D&D Beyond you can just search for the monster.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still know most stuff, and I will search by source sometimes. But like, man, Volo's Guide has some great, but like particularly like, okay, I would put this as more valuable than Mordenkainen's, simply because the stuff that's covered in it is gnolls, goblins, kobolds, giants, Micflayers. These are things you're going to use level 1 to 10. The stuff in Mordenkainen's is more stuff you'll use 10 plus. Yeah. But still, like, I think this is just, I love it.
Oh, and if you're a player who really, 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 really likes giants and you want to get in on a bit of that yourself, there's also the Rune Knight Fighter subclass, which will literally let you empower yourself with magical giant runes and grow to giant size eventually.
How did we skip over the Rune Knight for that entire... Oh my god, what are we saying? We're here talking about classes you can apply to giants. Make a giant Rune Knight that can grow from a huge size to a gargantuan size.
Oh, that's evil and excellent in equal measure. Oh, I love it.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it.
Okay, but if you have a comment, question, or query, please leave it below in the comment section on YouTube. You can also hit us up on Twitter, on the Micflayers podcast Twitter. Shoot us a tweet there if you have any requests for episodes you want us to do, queries, or just even some memes. We always love some memes. You can also find us on Spotify, YouTube, Breaker, Radio Public, and Google Podcasts. That's all of them, is it, Conor?
I believe so. Yes.
Awesome. I got
Spotify, it. Radio,
awesome.
I think so.
I got it right. Conor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet primarily. Well, We'll start with on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZEROPOINT, CONOR, 1N, very important. But primarily you can find me here on the Micflayers podcast every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time on all of the previously aforementioned platforms.
Awesome. If you want to try and find me on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which is in the bottom right hand corner there. You can also find me on the Micflayers Twitter account a lot as well, which is at MicFlayersPod, also in the bottom right hand corner, further down though. And similarly to Conor, you will mostly find me here on the Micflayers podcast every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time. Have a great day, folks. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next episode of Micflayers. Bye bye.
Goodbye, folks.